Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. We're kicking off today's Reddit dive with a tale of marketplace malice, a story of relentless lowballers, creative revenge, and the kind of pettiness that leaves you laughing. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Marketplace Revenge, $250 offer guy's wild goose chase. When I list something on Facebook Marketplace, my goal is to sell it quickly. What does that mean? It means my prices are low, sometimes even too low, and they're firm. I don't negotiate, but that's never really been an issue because people still buy it at the price I list. One thing I absolutely hate, though, is getting bombarded with 50 "is it still available" messages. When I get one of those, I just delete and ignore. A few days ago, I was selling a set of new takeoff tires and wheels. The MSRP for these was around $2,500, and used ones usually sold between $1,500 and $2,000. I listed mine for $1,000. Within an hour, I received about 20 messages asking about them. I always respond the same way: the price is the price, I will not hold them, first come, first serve. One of the guys messaged me with an offer of $250. Now, I know these tires are a tough sell at $2,000, but at $1,000 they go fast. So there was no way $250 was a reasonable offer. I politely responded with the simplest reply: no. But that didn't stop him. He followed up by sending me links to other listings of tires and wheels, trying to justify his offer, so I blocked him and moved on. Then about 10 minutes later, I received another message from a different Facebook account, same offer of $250. Apparently, he was using a second account. I blocked that one too. But then he did it again. He messaged me with a third account. At this point, I was done. Blocking him wasn't working, this guy was relentless, and his strategy seemed to be to annoy the heck out of me until I just gave in. I realized I couldn't win by just blocking him. So I did what anyone would do in this situation. I accepted his $250 offer. I messaged him saying that I would accept his offer, but he would need to meet me later that night since I was busy at the moment. He responded that he was about a 2-hour drive away and asked if we could meet halfway. I said no. He seemed eager to make a quick buck, so he agreed to come all the way to me. There's a street in my town with several pubs close together, all within half a mile. The street gets busy by 11 p.m. with no parking spots available nearby. People typically have to park at least a half mile away and walk to the pub. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I set the meet for 11 p.m. at one of those local pubs. Around 10:45 p.m., I messaged him asking him to meet me inside the pub. We could walk out to my truck to grab the wheels and tires. He messaged me back at 11 p.m. saying he was out front, but there was no way to park out front without blocking the entire street, and traffic was heavy at that hour. He couldn't just wait out front, he'd have to move. So I waited about 10 minutes before messaging him back. In that 10 minutes, I received at least 20 messages from him. He was getting frustrated, sending screenshots of his location, asking if he was in the right spot, and mentioning how he'd drive down the block and circle back. Finally, I replied, "Sorry about that, didn't see your message. I'm at XYZ pub, just park and come in. I'll grab you a beer." He accepted, parked what I assume was at least a half a mile away, and walked to the pub. I didn't respond for another 10 minutes, and he sent 20 plus more messages. Then I sent a simple message: "Sorry about that, didn't see your message. I walked down to PDQ pub, about 500 yards away, thinking you might be there. Meet me down here?" By midnight, I had this guy driving 2 hours one way, walking at least 2 miles, and going into all 3 pubs. He was swearing at me by now, but he was still 2 hours away from home, so I did what anyone would do. I turned off my Facebook notifications and went to bed. Oh, and the wheels and tires, they sold earlier that day for exactly $1,000. This is a masterclass in dealing with persistent lowballers who just don't know when to quit. Honestly, this guy practically begged for this outcome with his relentless badgering and multiple accounts. It's like he thought sheer stubbornness could force you into the deal. I can't get over the fact that he drove 2 hours, walked a couple of miles, and still didn't give up after being sent on a pub crawl wild goose chase. That level of desperation for a set of wheels he clearly couldn't afford is just wow. 10 for 10. This is the kind of pettiness that makes Facebook Marketplace tales legendary. And our second story. The tale of a greasy spoon tyrant. Years ago, I worked as a cook at a greasy spoon-style restaurant just off the interstate, I-95, that was connected to a hotel. The manager who hired me was fantastic. He handled all the paperwork during the slow periods in just 15 minutes and worked right alongside us in the kitchen. Everything ran smoothly under his management and the environment was good. Unfortunately, the company fired him and replaced him with a terrible new manager. This woman didn't drive, lived 15 miles away, and had to take 2 city buses to get to work, so she was never on time. She was also a raging alcoholic, which only made matters worse. It took her hours to complete the same paperwork that her old boss could knock out in 15 minutes. On top of that, she was abusive to everyone and was always power tripping. One day I checked my schedule and saw that I was listed for a shift from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. As far as I knew, the restaurant wasn't a 24-hour operation, so I showed up at 11 a.m. ready to work. When I arrived, the manager asked why I was there. I told her I was scheduled from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. She informed me that my shift was actually from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. because she decided to make the restaurant a 24-hour establishment due to the hotel being attached. I ended up working the night shift that day, but I started looking for a different job because the situation was getting unbearable. In the meantime, the manager found out that I had dozed off for about 15 minutes while on the clock during a slow period. She decided to deduct 3 hours from my paycheck for the break. Keep in mind, she didn't drive and buses didn't run overnight where we were, so there was no way for her to know how long I actually slept, plus the doors to the restaurant were unlocked and open to the public. I corrected the time on my time card, but she went back and changed it, adding a note that said, "I am your manager." Her attitude just got worse. I eventually found a better job, so I didn't say anything to anyone at work about leaving. However, on my last night, a Friday, I refused to work. My boss tried to cover my shift but couldn't stay awake, so she ended up calling in a few first shift workers early to cover for me. She tried to give me some grief about it when I stopped by to pick up my last paycheck, but I just smiled and walked away. The restaurant ended up closing down not long after I left, and I can't help but think that her poor management had something to do with it. It's wild how someone so unqualified, a chronically late, disorganized, and alcoholic manager managed not only to drive employees away, but also run the restaurant into the ground. Good on you for finding a better job and leaving her to deal with the chaos she created. The fact that the restaurant closed not long after you left speaks volumes about her leadership, or lack thereof. Some people just shouldn't be in charge. Good riddance to bad managers. And our last story. HOA Tyrant Karen, how we fought back and won. My family and I lived in our HOA neighborhood in Texas. The homes were well maintained, property values were climbing, and the community was generally a nice place to live. That changed a few years ago when the HOA board brought in a new property management company, PMC, that decided proactive enforcement would be their new mantra. Up until then, enforcement had been reasonable, but the new PMC had ideas, big ones. They convinced the board to adopt new rules, regulations, and bylaws, claiming it would preserve the neighborhood's prestige. In reality, it created a power trip for our longtime board president, Karen. Karen had been on the board for a decade and was well known for her dislike of anyone who dared question her authority. With a new PMC in her corner, Karen saw an opportunity to target families she didn't like, including mine and a handful of others. What followed was a masterclass in HOA harassment. It started with ridiculous violation notices, one for a package left on my porch, another for a bag of mulch temporarily left out while I was gardening. Then, out of nowhere, a $50 fine for mismatched paint on our house. The kicker? That fine was for the 3-foot paint sample squares they required us to paint as part of the approval process for changing our home's color. They hadn't even finished reviewing our submission before issuing the fine. Then came the pièce de résistance, a $100 fine for having Christmas lights in the summer. Fun fact, we didn't have Christmas lights up. It was clearly a mix-up, but complaints on the HOA website got us banned from posting there. It was Karen's kingdom, and dissent wasn't tolerated. After receiving multiple fines without proper notice, we realized this wasn't going to stop. We contacted a lawyer specializing in HOA law who immediately spotted major red flags. HOAs in Texas can't issue fines without explicit authority in their restrictive covenants. State law requires HOAs to send certified letters before issuing fines, giving owners a chance to fix alleged violations. Our HOA had never done this. Any new rules, regulations, or bylaws must be discussed and adopted in open meetings with notice to homeowners. Instead, Karen and her management company had been holding secret meetings. The HOA's actions were blatantly illegal, and Karen's power grab was laughably flimsy. Our lawyer advised us to appeal the fines with a simple, polite statement: "We do not believe this board has the authority to issue fines." When we sent this in, Karen and her cronies were stunned by our audacity. They upheld the fines, but their outrage was exactly what we needed to prove how far out of line they were. Armed with documented violations of state law, our lawyer drafted a complaint. It outlined every illegal action from unauthorized fines to secret meetings and demanded immediate resolution. When the HOA and management company received the complaint, panic ensued. Within weeks, Karen and 2 other board members abruptly resigned, citing time constraints. Elections were held, and sweet justice, the board was now controlled by the very people Karen had targeted. The HOA's lawyer reached out to settle. Our demands were clear: refund all fines, penalties, and late fees issued to any homeowner over the past 4 years, plus interest. Prohibit the PMC from issuing or enforcing violations. Their role would now be limited to administrative tasks. Revoke all actions taken by the previous board in the last 4 years. Implement a 10-year term limit for board members, worded in a way that effectively barred Karen from ever returning. Pay all of our legal fees. Faced with the mountain of evidence against them, the HOA had no choice but to comply. The settlement was approved, and we walked away victorious. While we celebrated this hard-earned victory, it wasn't without risk. Fighting an HOA is no small feat, as the legal system is often skewed in their favor. If the HOA had decided to fight us to the bitter end, we could have faced years of appeals and tens of thousands in legal fees. But for us, it was worth it to restore fairness and ensure that Karen's reign of terror came to an end. Today, the HOA operates smoothly under the new board. Karen's departure is still a hot topic in the neighborhood, and we're thrilled to have been part of the epic smackdown that sent her packing. If there's one thing we've learned, it's this: don't mess with people who know their rights and have the receipts to back them up. This story is so satisfying. It's like the ultimate HOA revenge fantasy come to life. Karen's little reign of terror perfectly encapsulates what makes so many people despise HOAs: unchecked power wielded by someone who has nothing better to do than micromanage their neighbors. Your methodical approach, lawyer up, document everything, and call them out on their shady practices, was absolutely the right move. And the fact that Karen's antics led to her own downfall is peak justice. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.